Hello and welcome to Piece of Pod, a podcast brought to you by South Coast law firm Warner Goodman. I'm Sarah Whitemore. I'm an employment lawyer and senior partner in the firm with over 30 years of experience. In this podcast, I'll be having conversations with law firm partners, business owners, clients and other contacts of mine, and we'll be engaging in conversations about running businesses, career journeys, and how to excel in the world of work. So if that's of interest, why not grab yourself a cuppa, get yourself comfortable, and let's dive in. In this episode, we're joined again, I should say, by Cath Dixon. This is the first time we've had a second visit from someone to the podcast. And Cath Dixon, if you haven't seen her original podcast, was one of the interviewees in season 1. So feel free to pause this podcast, go back to season 1, have a look at Cath's episode and find all about her career journey, what she does for us in the business, where she sees her future lying. But just a slight recap, she's the HR consultant in our Peace of Mind team here at Warner Goodman. And Cath's joining me today because as a special one-off, we're doing a podcast on the Employment Rights Bill. This is the new laws that are coming in that are going to affect all employers and all employees that have been brought in by the Labour government. And so just to summarise those in terms of headlines, if anybody hasn't seen this or it's been a case of being hidden under a stone for a while, the key things that are coming in are changes to the eligibility for unfair dismissal so that all employees, regardless of length of service, will be protected from unfair dismissal. There are changes in relation to sexual harassment laws, in particular in relation to whistleblowing and sexual harassment. There are going to be changes in terms of 0 hours contracts. The Labour government, before they were elected, talked about banning exploitative 0 hours contracts, and that's one of the provisions in the new bill. There are changes in relation to shift workers, changes in relation to trade union rights, changes in relation to flexible working, statutory sick pay, collective redundancy. I don't know, welcome Cath. There's a lot for us to unpick there. Is there anything you think I've missed off that list?
The only thing I can think of at the moment, because it is a long list, is the right to switch off.
Right to switch off. There are eligibility provisions in terms of parental leave.
Yeah.
There's going to be bereavement leave beyond parental bereavement leave.
They're going to review carers leave slightly further down the line, so that they've talked about some of these changes happening sooner rather than later, and the later ones I think are looking at parental leave, which they've not really defined, but I think means maternity, adoption, paternity, the whole kind of suite I've taken from that. I don't know about you, but
yes, indeed.
Looking at that down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this was heralded by the Labour Party during the election campaign prior to coming into office in their plan to make work pay, which was an interesting read. It was published as part of their election manifesto, and then they launched the bill within 100 days of getting into power, which was what they promised in their election. But the changes are going to be coming in a more measured basis, aren't they, over the course of the next 2 years or so?
Yeah, I think the only clear date they've given is autumn 2026 for the removal of unfair dismissal rights, or the needing 2 years service, so unfair dismissal rights from day one. Other than that, they've sort of said 2026 in general, haven't they? I think it's still rather vague.
That's
apart
right.
from that one.
And I think the reason that they've done that is they want to consult. They want to consult businesses.
Yeah, absolutely.
They want to consult the trade unions. In fact, they've launched some consultations already on some of these provisions, looking at the detailed aspects of it. So a lot of the things that are in the Employment Rights Bill talk about them being subject to regulations that might be issued or subject to secondary legislation. There's more material coming down the line which will be the product of the consultation.
Yeah, there's definitely some more detail that we feel we need at the moment anyway, isn't there? When we look at it, it's giving us a flavour, it's giving us a gist of what they want to do, but we haven't got the full picture yet by any means. But they're not small changes. We're not talking about a compliance-related change. This is changing how businesses are going to need to work, how they're going to need to manage their people.
And they say it's going to be a sort of a revolution, a career moment where we all say, hang on, this has completely changed the way we work. I've been dealing with employment law for over 30 years now. We've had gradual changes as they've brought in bits of new law. So, 30 years ago they introduced disability discrimination, and then gradually they bring in these different protections. But this is looking at a whole host of things and is really going to be quite a period of change for a lot of businesses.
Absolutely. And as an HR professional, obviously my whole career, my whole ethos is around people. And if we put our people first, then everything else takes care of itself, because they look after the business, they look after our profits, they look after our customers, they look after everything if we're looking after our people. So for me, this legislation is very much aligned with HR strategy. So regardless of your political persuasion, and this isn't a political reason I'm saying this, I'm saying it because actually as an HR professional, I really believe that actually this legislation is going to put HR strategy, HR people, that people first agenda front and centre for businesses. They're going to have to change how they do things, and that can only be a good thing.
So let's start to unpick it all.
Yep.
You and I have been talking to business owners and HR managers about the new laws. What do you think the key concerns are that businesses have with the new Employment Rights Bill? There's a whole shopping list of things that are happening, but what are the key things that they're worried about?
So with small businesses in particular, it's always going to be about cost and the thought that this is going to bring in further cost for them. Now, I think there's lots that's going on out there that is costing small businesses more money. So I don't want to appear flippant in terms of saying, well, we're just going to have to find a way to afford it. It's not about that. But it's about reframing how you look at it a little bit, in terms of, if we get things right first time, that costs less money. If we get the right people in the right place, doing the right job at the right time with the right skills, they'll be effective in what they do, they'll be motivated in what they do, and they will make you money. So it's an investment, and that's, so I think the concerns are largely going to be around, well, what if I don't get the right person in the right place at the right time? I can't then dismiss them. So it's focusing then on your recruitment procedure, your induction procedure, your performance management procedures, to make sure that you are getting the right people in the right place at the right time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So where we are at the moment, we have a 2-year period in effect where we can see how people do on the job. They do have some rights in those 2 years. So, if we dismiss somebody because they're a whistleblower or a trade union activist, health and safety rep, are pregnant, then they can bring the automatic unfair dismissal claims without any period of service. And if they've got discrimination claims, of course, they can bring those. But generally, broadly speaking, if it's about someone's performance or their conduct, we can appoint them, give them a chance, see how they go. And there aren't really any sort of penalties or issues around probation periods, and we can have them if we want. We don't have to have them. If we don't have them, we can hire and fire people almost at will. So people take a chance at the moment, don't they?
Yes.
Sometimes when recruitment is hard, when you can't find the right candidate, you have a halfway house situation where you think, well, I'll give that person a chance. But under the new provisions, if what's being heralded it actually comes in, you will have rights from day one, and even in probation you will have rights, and there will be provisions about needing to have transparent processes for dismissing during probation periods. It will be much harder to remove somebody if you get it wrong, and so businesses perhaps won't take those chances. They won't risk bringing somebody in. So as you say, they've got to be much more aware and alive to the whole recruitment process and what they do to bring people on board.
Absolutely. I think there's 2 things to unpick there. Is firstly the whole taking a chance on somebody, thinking you can get rid of them within the next 2 years. well, you're also taking the chance that they haven't got a protected characteristic that you're unaware of, because you and I know that when we're advising clients, they've got less than 2 years service, so we can just get rid, can't we? Well, actually, best practice would still always be to go through due process, go through a fair procedure, because you never know when one of those protected characteristics might be at play that might change the dynamic of what you're doing. So I don't know, there's I forget where it is, but a good case that I always quote of the new worker in a fast food restaurant type scenario, was dismissed because she kept sitting down and when it wasn't her break time, and she was just dismissed on the spot without any conversation or anything. And it turned out she was pregnant, and she was early stages of pregnancy, and she was often comes with tiredness, but having that conversation before making that decision to dismiss would have enabled her to disclose that, because again, early stages of pregnancy, you might not be disclosing it yet, but it would have enabled her to know, this is a problem, it's likely to get me the sack, I better tell my boss about it, and then she would have been protected. So following due process has always been something we would recommend people do, by having a meeting, talking about the problem, because then you might identify that there is some other reason for the issue with the performance that you can do something about, particularly with the emergence of neurodiversity, etc. All these issues that are around at the moment that are an issue for employers. So that's all.
We come from it as lawyers, we come from it from a claims perspective and saying, oh, you might find that she's got this issue and there might be a claim. But actually, from an HR point of view, there's a sort of wider picture, isn't there? About it's not just about this one individual that we're dealing with, but actually, how is the rest of our organisation observing what we do and how we're treating that person? And how does that play out for them in terms of their future decisions about remaining with our business? And it's much more of a cultural and sort of ethos point as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's about doing the right thing at the end of the day for your people. And if people think that they can be fired at the drop of a hat, they will be more reserved. They will perhaps look for jobs elsewhere where they feel there is more security. It's the perception thing of the people that are working around them as to why that person was there one day and gone the next. And also, actually, you might be able to change things. So you can still take a chance on people. But if you are having a thorough probation period where you're staying in touch with that employee throughout those first 6 months, I think they've mentioned 9 months so I would be suggesting we had a 6-month probation period with a possible 3-month extension. But during that 6-month period, having regular check-ins with the individual, so you're identifying early when there is a problem so that you can take action to address it. And if you can't take action to address it, so that you're really clear about what the expectations are, so that then you can clearly evidence when those expectations have not been met, and then you've got a fair reason for dismissal. So it's all best practice stuff that, as I say, this is why it's an HR strategy piece of legislation rather than anything else, because this is all best practice that your HR manager, if you've got one, or your HR consultant will have been saying, well, the best way to do it is this, but we like to cut corners because the law has said we can. And those corners are now being eroded, so we can't cut them. We've got to follow best practice, and that can only be a good thing.
And there's lots of other things that businesses are worried about too, aren't there? I mean, the unfair dismissal from day one is going to be a big change. That's a key change. But some of the other provisions sound relatively innocuous, provisions banning exploitative 0 hours contracts and providing compensation when shift changes happen and so on. But these are still a worry for businesses, because there are lots of businesses who rely on that sort of ad hoc availability of staff. You think about care sector, you work a lot in the care sector. A lot of people there that are working on that sort of basis. Or we do a lot of work with students' unions and students working in bars and retail outlets and so on campuses across the country often are wanting to have flexibility around their hours. It might be people with childcare needs, elderly care needs, all sorts of things. And there's two-way sort of benefit from it for both the employer having the flexibility and the individual having the flexibility. So that's going to be something that employers need to start to think about, because in a year or 2 years' time we need to be running those sorts of teams in a very different way, particularly if we're going to be paying compensation for shift changes, which we might at the moment not be paying too much heed to. We might be happily, flexibly changing people's hours, but that's going to be a way we run our business differently now under this bill.
Absolutely. And I think, the saving grace in there is that if flexibility is what the employee wants, that can be maintained. They've indicated that that's going to be an option. So just because you've got 0 hours contracts and your employees like 0 hours contracts, so in the care sector there's a lot of employees that do like that flexibility, that can stay, that's not going to go. But businesses are going to have to be a bit smarter about roster management in those types of scenarios, and making sure that they're giving fair and reasonable notice of when those shifts are. But the benefit, one of the things that I think will help in this situation, is investing in software. There's all sorts of rostering packages out there at the moment that will help you do that. I don't have first-hand experience, I can't recommend any, but I know that the technology exists to make that process easier. So that might be something that employers need to look at in order to help them manage the flexible working and the rosters and the expected hours and all those kind of things.
So do you think that the changes that are coming, the Employment Rights Bill changes that are coming, are just part of the evolution of the world of work? Are they just the next step in changes that we've been experiencing across our working lives, for example?
Yeah, I really do think they are. However, I've spoken about this in a couple of our events recently, and do with a timeline on the wall behind me. But if we just think about our history as a humankind, when we first left the caves and became hunter-gatherers, and somebody put a fence around a piece of land and said, this is mine, as soon as we got that ownership of land, so we had the people that owned the land and the people that worked on the land, and we had that master-servant relationship, which is what our whole society has been based on. Our whole class system is based on those that own and have the business and those that work for them. And that has been our case. That is what shaped our economy and our system of working for thousands of years. Generations upon generations since we left the caves. It's only really been in the last 100 years or so that we've started to view work differently. Starting with sort of when the men went off to war and they came back and found that women had kept the country running. And my God, women can actually do jobs and have children at the same time, and not just keep the home running, keep the country running. So, we started to see more women in work. We started to see more diversity in work. We started to move away from agriculture and mining-based industries, which were very much command and control styles of leadership, and we needed more service-based industries and the entertainment industry and developing technologies which don't thrive under command and control. If you need innovation and creativity, an innovative and creative person isn't going to thrive by somebody telling him what he's got to do and when he's got to do it, or she's got to do and what she's got to do it by. So it was only sort of in the last even 50 years or so that we started realising that there was a different way to manage people. And then you've got Hertzberg and Maslow and their theories on motivation, and we started looking at how we actually motivate employees. So if there's people out there listening to me talk about evolution and all these changes being positive and the way forward, and they're thinking, well, this isn't how we've always done it. Well, no, but actually we're still in the very early stages of this change. We've done it this way for centuries, and the pace of change since the 1900s has been significant. And that's before we even got to the pandemic, and we saw how quickly change happened at that point. If we look at the last few years and how work was 9 to 5 and in an office, it's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
And
it was very quick, and it was very interesting to deal with clients who in 2019 would have said in response to a flexible working request, no, you can't work from home, or no, you can't work in this particular way. And then in spring 2020 we're saying, you will work this way, we will impose that. And businesses were able to rapidly change in order to survive, it's fair to say. We were up against the wall, weren't we? And we had
absolutely.
to make changes. But these are changes that we can't go back on.
Yeah.
The box has been opened, the genie's out of the bottle, or whatever the expression
absolutely.
is, and it's progressing on from that.
Yeah, and I think this legislation is continuing that curve. We had that radical change as a result of that change was always going to happen, but it would have happened at a much slower pace if we hadn't have had the pandemic. But what the pandemic did was accelerate that pace of change rapidly, really rapidly. And so, I can imagine there's a lot of people out there that still go, whoa, I still haven't got used to the fact that, flexible working is a thing. And so I can imagine that, these changes that are being proposed feel like a massive thing, particularly for small businesses.
And we've got the whole Gen Z coming into the workplace too. Now, you and I have had a number of conversations about Gen Z language. We know our skibbity toilet riz. Yeah. We know how to say she ate and left no crumbs. We know all of that language stuff. But they come with their language and also their expectations, and the way that they're going to work are going to be very different. Their expectations of work, their expectations of their managers. This is all part of the change that's happening.
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of started with the millennials, before Gen Z, in terms of, we accept that millennials want to work for somebody where they feel like they have some autonomy in what they're doing, that they are working for a cause, their work has value, has purpose. And again, the pandemic kind of sped that up for everybody again, that, we realised that there were these different ways of working, and the older generations went, I like what the millennials are on about. I want some of this too. That's not to say there haven't always been people in the older generations that wanted to work that way, but not everybody got it. And I think more people are getting it now, that actually there are different ways of working that are more effective, that are more productive, that allow employees to thrive in their employment, which ultimately is good for business.
So the employee thrives and then the business thrives. And this comes back to what you said right at the outset, which is put your people first, deal with your people, and they in turn will
take care of everything else. Yeah.
So some businesses, it's fair to say, some businesses we've been talking to very much view the labour changes as being a barrier to progress. The additional costs as being a barrier to survival. How can they flip that narrative? How can they see these changes as an opportunity?
I think it is about reframing it for them. There's the Henry Ford quote that if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. If you're going into something saying, well, this will never work, this isn't going to, this is no good for me, I'm not going to adapt, you're kind of being perhaps a bit of a dinosaur and you're going to go extinct. And businesses have always had to adapt. This is just another way that they're going to need to adapt. They've had to adapt to technology changes. You've had to adapt to the pandemic. You've had to adapt to AI. We're having to adapt to, how AI is impacting on us at work. Business always has to adapt, because if you can't adapt, you stagnate and then you go extinct. And
our history, we're littered with the likes of Woolworths and so on, big institutions that we think will be there forever and have been there forever.
Blockbuster didn't adapt.
Yeah. So it's that same sort of point we're at now, where we need to spot our blockbuster moment and make sure that we are getting ahead of that.
Yeah, because ultimately employees will vote with their feet, and they will see the competitor down the road that is offering flexible working, that is offering, autonomy and a great place to work and a great environment to work in. I'm not talking about bells and whistles or big bad chairs and ping pong tables and all that kind of nonsense. I'm talking about where it feels good to work because you can be your authentic self, and you're supported and you're given the skills and the tools that you need to do your job, and you're treated like an adult. And they will go there because they can thrive there, and that business will therefore thrive.
And so the key to addressing the Employment Rights Bill is to address your people strategy and to reframe your people strategy and to revisit that. What would you say the key elements of a successful people strategy are that aligns with these sorts of proposals?
So it's starting right at the beginning with mission, vision, values, and behaviours. So what is your company about? We've spoken about millennials and Gen Zs that want to work somewhere where they are contributing to something more, where there is a values match. So you're not going to know whether you've got a values match unless you know what your organisational values are. So what are you about? What are you trying to achieve in the world? And how are you going to achieve it? And how do you expect people to behave while they're doing it? Because if you're clear about those things, you're really then clear about the sort of people that you want to work in your organisation. And then you interview for those people, and you find the people that are passionate about the same things that you're passionate about, that have the same values as your organisation, that believe in the same things and want to work for you and what you're producing, whether that's a service or a product or whatever it is. And they will want to work for you.
So to summarise, so you get your values right?
Yeah.
Once you know what your values are, you can identify the type of people that you need
Yeah.
to meet those values, because their values need to align.
Yeah.
Then you can revisit your recruitment strategies to make sure you're targeting the right people and recruiting the right people.
Yes. So looking at your recruitment processes, how you attract people, how you interview them. Again, this isn't just about how we comply with this legislation. It's also thinking about the whole equality, diversity and inclusion agenda. Been working on the neurodiversity masterclass recently and thinking about the things that help neurodiverse people in the recruitment process, are things that help everybody in the recruitment process. So being really, really clear in your adverts and your job descriptions about what the expectations of the role are, what people really need to be able to do, and focus those in on actually what the key things are, rather than having a 3-page job description of which actually only 2.5 lines of that are the critical element, and the rest can be taught on the job or developed as you go along it. So thinking about getting that clarity about what it is that you need. Then inducting people into your workplace thoroughly once you've selected them, and inducting them into what the culture is, what the values are, how we behave around here, what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable in terms of our behaviour, so that they know how, they're not going to swing the lead, they're not going to make crass jokes or whatever it is that breaches the dignity of somebody else, because that's just actually how decent human beings behave. Mm-hmm. But sometimes we need to make it clear and make sure that everybody is behaving in that same way. So making sure our induction process deals with the values and the culture of the organisation, as well as dealing with the nuts and bolts of what they actually need to get the job done. So are we giving them the tools that they need? Are we giving them the training that they need? Do they have the structure that they need to get that job done? And then checking in with them along the way, the probation period again, making sure during those early months that we're checking in on a regular basis to keep all those things at the forefront of the mind, embedded, that we've got the right person. Because if they're not, it gives you the opportunity to do things a bit differently, to tweak it and see if we can get them on track. And if we can't get them on track, then at least you've got the evidence to justify safe dismissal.
And all of this you would capture in your people strategy to start with, but then also in your policies that support these different processes, that help your managers to work through these different processes that you're talking about.
Yeah, so although it would be captured in your policy can sit on your intranet or in your employee handbook or whatever it is. It's about getting your people engaged with it making sure your managers understand what it is you're trying to achieve and that they have the skills they need to be able to make those decisions in the first place. So we are looking at employers needing to invest in the leadership development of their managers. Again, this is all good practice stuff. Good employers are already out there doing this stuff. It's just encouraging all businesses that actually you need to think about the skill set of your line managers, your people managers, to ensure that they're in the best possible place to help you recruit the right people at the right place at the right time with the right skills. Because your managers also need to be the right people in the right place at the right time with the right skills. So we need to develop our leaders.
And we're talking a lot about new starters and the process of getting them on board and the right people and training them and so on. But sometimes it's actually a bigger picture, a bigger cultural picture that an organisation needs to change. And that might be part of their people strategy too, implementing some sort of cultural change. Where would a business start on that?
Top and bottom. So firstly, at the top, making sure your leadership team is actually aligned. Are the people who are making the decisions in the business all on the same page behind that mission, vision and value stuff? Because if you've got any fractures in that leadership team, it's going to get bigger as it goes down. Then you will get organisations split between your finance director thinks this and your ops director thinks that, and the whole organisation will separate, and that's just not good. You're not then one team working in the same direction towards the same mission and vision. You've got segregated teams then. So yeah, make sure your leadership team are all aligned, all on board with the mission, vision, values and behaviour stuff. Same time, talk to the people on the front line. Actually, how is it working here? What is it like? What works? What doesn't work? How does it feel to work here? What are we like as an organisation at managing you, at dealing with the difficult things? How are we? Taking that feedback and then doing something with it. Doing some quick wins. So I don't know. They don't like the fact that there's never any soap in the toilets. Make sure there's soap in the toilets. Basic, But it's some of those little things that speak of a lack of care can be really, really quickly addressed, and they can be having major impact on your staff and their motivation. Again, going back to Hertzberg and his hierarchy of needs, actually some of those base level needs about personal safety and care are often the things that we get wrong as employers. Thinking that, well, that's not important, but it can be really important to the staff. So yeah, getting some quick wins out there and looking for your change agents, your early adopters, the ones that go, oh, this mission, vision, value stuff, I understand what you're trying to do there and I'm on board with it. Identify those people who are your future leaders, because if you can get them on board with your culture change, then the rest will see that it's working for them and will follow behind. So yeah, top and bottom.
Top and bottom. And so if you're an HR manager listening to this and you're in an organisation of that sort, how do they go about getting senior leadership teams on board with the sorts of changes that are needed? You talk about it needs to be done from the top, but your HR manager listening to this is thinking, oh gosh, now I need to go and talk to... How do they do that?
If I had a magic wand, I know it's all very well me sat here saying these things. I've been that HR person in that organisation, sitting there going, yeah, Cath, I get all of that. I'm on board. That's what I want in my organisation too. But I'm banging my head against a brick wall with my bunch of directors. I think this legislation is a really good opportunity to start those conversations. To introduce your directors to us, so that, because sometimes hearing it from a different person, say I've been that HR person internally, and yeah, okay, you just keep us out of court, Cath. Yep, you just do that. You just make sure we're following the rules, rather than actually engaging with their HR professionals on a strategic basis. This is your opportunity to have that conversation. This is your opportunity to say, Chief Exec, senior team, we need to have at HR a people strategy in order to meet these in order to comply with this legislation, because this isn't just about compliance, this is about how we manage people. So we need to be having conversations about people at board level. Again, out there in the big wide world of HR, organisations are already doing this. They've got HR directors in place, and they're having those board level conversations, but small businesses aren't, or not all of them are, some of them are, but it's much, much harder in small business to have that strategic HR conversation with your senior leaders. So show them this podcast, send them a link, and say, look, this is what, are we business leaders? I don't know. What are we? We know what we're talking about at any road. Experts. Yeah. Thought leadership, thought provoking. Other people who know our stuff from the employment law side of things. And we're saying you need to be focusing on having a meaningful people strategy and having meaningful conversations at senior leadership and board level about your people strategy, because that's the only way you are going to be able to comply with this new legislation.
And so once we've got the senior leadership on board, and you talked about it being a two-way thing, we need to sort senior leadership first, get them on board so they're leading.
Yeah.
And then we need to talk about the rest of the workforce and the people at the coal face and how
what's it really like to work here?
To dig the coal. Are we then talking about employee surveys and workshops, and is it that sort of approach that engages those people?
Definitely. Depending on the size of your organisation, whether you want to do surveys or workshops, or whether you need, that's something that we can provide support with in terms of workshops. But doing workshops to find out what is it really like to work here, and what needs to change, and then using that to shape the priorities for your for the changes for those that are already employed. So there's two streams to it. There's the recruitment, induction, probation, and there's your what's it really like to work here, what needs to change. Those two angles to your people strategy.
And you talked about identifying role models and early adopters to drive change. How do businesses do that?
Through that survey process, through that workshop process, talking to your staff, knowing them, who actually, when you talk about mission, vision and value stuff, who is engaged, who believes in what you're saying and is out there championing the cause, they'll make themselves known.
So just recognising enthusiasm, actually identifying and observing your staff and seeing what their approach is. And
they will make themselves known. Just embrace them and lift them up and give them the tools to help them bring people with them.
And what are some of the common pitfalls that businesses should avoid really when they're implementing some of these changes, do you think?
Expecting it to be quick. This is a long game. It's not a case of just telling people that we're going to change and expecting it to change. That doesn't work. Change is a process. It has to happen. It has to evolve over time. Make sure your expectations are set in the first place about that this is a long journey that we're on, a big ship to turn around, that kind of mentality. Keep the faith. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater when the first person, says, "Oh, this is rubbish." But having some, I like to agree, some team conditions where you can have those conversations where you say, "This isn't working. Okay, so why is it not working? What is the thing that's not working?" But being able to talk about those in a safe environment where somebody doesn't feel that they're going to be oystered out for not towing the party line, but able to say, actually, the reason we're not on board with this new culture change is because actually that senior manager over there, they're still walking in meetings and banging their fist on the table. So, your values of dignity and respect are not being adhered to by one of your senior leaders. That's the problem for us. And so you have to create an environment where people feel able to and safe to come forward with those type of issues that are impacting on the change process. Because if you've got individuals within that process that are not changing, you obviously need to know who they are so that then you can work with that individual to get them to see the benefits of change. And if they won't, then maybe you need to have conversations about whether they are the best fit for your organisation, because those are the sort of things, behaviours that will turn a culture toxic.
So it sounds from what you're saying then the two key things there are, first of all, time, doing this over a period of time, and second of all, not doing it on your own, having somewhere to talk or to go to that you can bounce ideas and you can get support.
An external perspective is really, really helpful, because when you're in it, you can't see out of it. And we're talking about challenging your closest peers, particularly if you're talking about the senior leadership team. You're talking about having to have those difficult conversations with the people that you work very closely with. That's hard. And so having an external person that can give you an external perspective on what's going on and different ways that you can approach it and different ways that you can try and have that conversation, or they have that conversation for you, because maybe it's falling on deaf ears coming from the same voice all the time. Maybe they need to hear a different voice say those things in order for it to go in. So having an external perspective is hugely beneficial in that process.
So bringing it right back to the beginning, I mean, this is a different type of podcast episode this week, because we're just focusing on the one employment rights bill and what businesses can do. All of the things we've been talking about today are ways of helping businesses to deal with the employment rights bill. This bill isn't about us coming in as lawyers and saying, this one policy, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
If we
Tick
change
that
this
box.
in your contract, you'll be fine. Businesses and HR managers need to find someone to work with, or need to approach us to work with over a period of time, to address all sorts of things within their business, to upskill their business in all sorts of ways, to tackle all the variety of things that are coming in the employment rights bill. Is that a fair sort of summary?
Yeah, absolutely. This is multifaceted. This isn't just, tick box, new policy, job done exercise. This is massive change.
And the good thing for businesses is this is not coming in for a couple of years. We're talking now in November 24. We're probably not expecting this until autumn 26. So businesses have got a couple of years. When you're talking about a need to do this over a period of time, they've got time, but they need to start now.
Yeah,
they need to start
absolutely.
now in terms of engaging with someone to support them through this change process and to address the things that are coming.
Yeah.
So that when it does hit in 2026,
they're already ready for it.
They're already ready for it.
Starting in summer of 2026 would be too late. Yeah, absolutely. You need to start thinking about it now. Start working out where you are in terms of your mission, vision, values, behaviours, where your staff are in terms of what it's like to work here, what are you going to change in order to make it better for everybody. And
there are tools, there are things that we can produce, there are support mechanisms that we have, there are policies that we can produce, there are discussions we can have. And you and I have been talking about a programme for business to equip people to deal with the employment rights bill. And I think this is a really exciting programme that we're putting together. So we're talking about something that's going to run over a period of time, probably about a 6-month programme with lots of different modules in it, lots of ways to think about collaborative working, coming together to talk about people strategy, talk about training, talk about recruitment, all sorts of different things that are being put in place. It's quite exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited about it because this is my passion. I think this is a fantastic program that we're starting to put together that has so many different ways to engage with this. You're not in it on your own. We're going to hold your hand through this process. Going to challenge you, because we are challenging how you think about your employees and how you do things. So it is going to challenge you, but we're going to hold your hand and we're going to take you through it. And you'll come out at the end a better business and better prepared for these changes that are happening. And you will make more money at the end of the day, because put your people first, they'll sort everything else out.
And at Warner Goodman, we do things differently with our business clients, don't we?
Absolutely.
We have a community where our businesses already support one another. And it sounds as though a lot of this change and a lot of the things that you're talking about will come from people supporting one another in the world of business.
Yeah, absolutely.
We already have that approach with things like our Facebook group, where people come together They hear what we have to say from an employment law perspective or from an HR perspective, but then they're able to talk to one another about how do you implement that in practice.
How's that worked for you?
If we're talking about the new holiday law, that all sounds great in terms of the law, but have you got a spreadsheet that helps me to put that into to practice? And this programme will give people an opportunity to be part of a community like that and to
absolutely
peer support one another.
Yeah, hive mind. If one person hasn't got the solution, then actually as a group of people coming together, the hive mind, all those different people working together will find a solution, and will find a solution for everyone in the hive. I think it's a great opportunity to do some cross-working, learn from different organisations, different sectors. How do they do it in the care sector versus how they do it in a corporate versus how they do it in manufacturing. There's different challenges, and we can learn from each other. And there's huge opportunity for to take different things away from how the people have always done it. Go, you've always done it that way. Why haven't we done that? We can do that. Yeah, let's bring it on.
And my experience of that, I've talked many, many times before about going to China. I went to China I think it was probably about 20-ish years ago, with a group of, I think, 25 or so businesses. It was all funded by the state back then. It was amazing. We had a great time. But it was a strategic thinking programme on the Great Wall of China. And it involved businesses from all sorts of different sectors. There was a fireplace importer, there was a contact lens manufacturer, there was a lawyer, there was an accountant, but all sorts of different businesses. And we sat on the Great Wall of China and we talked about our businesses and our challenges, and the thoughts that we had around people were the same across all the businesses. It was, and it did challenge you actually to say, well, why don't we do that? Because as lawyers, and I'm sure other sectors are the same, we can sit around our partnership table and say, IBM are doing X, Y, Z. Oh, but we don't do that. We're lawyers. We don't do that. And I think other sectors are probably the same. They'll probably say, but in the care sector, we don't do that. Yeah. But talking to people from different businesses just challenges your thinking, and you start to think, well, why don't we? And what can we learn from one another? And I think that's the beauty of this programme. It's going to be that giving people that space to have that opportunity to challenge one another and to support one another. Yeah,
and to make connections that will last, going forward. Because as we've talked about, this isn't a one-day easy fix. This is an ongoing process. And so creating that community that going forward, when, you have a change in senior leadership, one of your key members of your team 6 months down the line, you'll have a community of people that you can go, we've just got a new FD in, I need to bring him on board with this. How do have you had to deal with this? How have you done it? And so they're there for all that type of, or hopefully they'll be there for all that kind of stuff later on down the line.
Can't wait.
I know, I'm so excited.
We normally end with an audience-sourced question, but because this is a different episode of the podcast and because we are talking about the Employment Rights Act, I'm just going to ask you, really, any final thoughts or comments, any final tips that businesses might take from our discussion today?
I'd just circle back to the Henry Ford quote, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. It's about mindset. See this as a positive opportunity to embrace a people first, people strategy, and they will take care of the rest.
And come and join our programme.
Come and join our programme. Yeah.
Cath, thank you so much for today. I've really enjoyed our chat. And
Me too.
Carry on outside the room, I'm sure.
I'm sure we will.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. I hope you found it insightful and empowering. To stay connected, why not hit the subscribe button? Or if you think your friends might be interested, why not rate us as a 5? To be first to know about upcoming episodes, follow us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram and LinkedIn, where you'll find us at Warner Goodman LLP, or follow us on YouTube, where our episodes are at Piece of Pod. Thank you again. Until next time.